In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into the minds of some of the most depraved and twisted individuals in history. These are the people that the FBI wishes that the world would forget about, but their heinous crimes continue to haunt us to this day. Are you ready to take a dive into the darkest corners of humanity? Today, we're going to explore the chilling world of serial killers and murderers who, despite their heinous crimes, have fallen into relative obscurity. These are the 10 most evil people that the FBI wants you to forget about. While many infamous killers have become household names, these individuals may not be as well known, but their crimes are just as gruesome and disturbing. From the sadistic Golden State Killer to the cannibalistic Richard Chase, we'll be exploring the twisted minds of these killers and the horrors they inflicted on their victims. It's time to buckle up and prepare for a journey into the depths of evil. These are the 10 most evil people that the FBI wants you to forget about, and their stories are sure to send shivers down your spine. 10. Angel Maturino Resendez was one of the most notorious serial killers of his time. Also known as the Railway Killer, he was a master of disguise and used trains to travel from one state to another, making it difficult for law enforcement to track him down. Resendez was a vicious killer who targeted innocent people at random, breaking into their homes in the middle of the night and attacking them with whatever he could find. He had a penchant for sexually assaulting some of his victims before taking their lives, making him even more terrifying and heinous. Despite his cunning and elusive nature, Resendez was eventually caught and brought to justice in 1999. He was found guilty of murdering at least 15 people and was sentenced to death. In 2006, Resendez was executed by lethal injection, putting an end to his reign of terror. The reason why Resendez was considered one of the most evil serial killers in American history was due to his complete lack of empathy for his victims and his remorseless nature. He took pleasure in the pain and suffering of others, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. His use of trains to evade capture also added to his sinister persona, making him a feared and infamous figure in the minds of the public. 9. Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer, also known as Joseph James DeAngelo, was one of the most prolific and terrifying serial killers in American history. He evaded capture for over 40 years, which only added to his notoriety and the public's fascination with him. DeAngelo's modus operandi was especially heinous. He would break into homes in the dead of night, brutally attacking and raping his victims before stealing their valuables. In some cases, he would even murder his victims, leaving a trail of terror and devastation in his wake. Despite his cunning and ability to evade law enforcement, DeAngelo was eventually caught and brought to justice in 2018. It was a long-awaited victory for the families of his victims and the many people who lived in fear of his attacks for decades.
I've listened to all your statements, each one of them, and I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt.
The reason why the Golden State Killer was so evil is that he committed these heinous crimes over a span of years and seemed to take pleasure in causing pain and suffering to his victims. His ability to evade capture for so long also added to his sinister persona, making him one of the most feared and fascinating serial killers in American history. 8. Charles Ng. Charles Ng is a notorious American-Canadian serial killer who committed a string of horrific crimes that still haunt the public psyche today. His depravity and lack of remorse are what make him such an interesting and chilling figure to discuss. Ng, along with his accomplice Leonard Lake, was responsible for the murder and torture of at least 11 people in California in the late 1980s. The two men had a torture chamber on Lake's property where they kept their victims and subjected them to unspeakable horrors.
What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired or bored or not interested, I simply want to put her away, lock her up in a little room, get her out of my sight, out of my life. A slave, there's no way around it. Primarily a sexual slave, but nonetheless a physical slave as well. And I believe that if I can construct a holding cell, a place where I can put such a woman, a facility that is so stark and so empty, so cold, so quiet, so totally removed from the world, that I can quickly condition a young woman to cooperate with me fully.
Ng and Lake's crimes were especially gruesome, with evidence suggesting that they may have even cannibalized some of their victims. Their twisted behavior, coupled with the sheer number of people they murdered, made them a source of fear and fascination for the public and law enforcement alike. Despite being arrested in 1985, Ng fought extradition from Canada for years before finally being brought to justice in California. He was found guilty of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to death. The reason why Charles Ng is so interesting to talk about is his complete lack of remorse for his actions.
If you go along with this, cooperate with this, we'll be as nice as we can to you within the limits of keeping you prisoner. If you don't go along with this, we'll probably take you into the bed, tie you down, rape you, shoot you, and bury you. So, my lady, time's up. Make your choice.
But I want to be available.
That's all we wanted to hear. While you're here, we'll keep you busy. You'll wash for us, you'll clean for us, cook for us, you'll cook for us. That's your choice in a nutshell. It's not much of a choice, unless you've got a death wish.
Even during his trial, he showed no signs of empathy or regret for the horrific crimes he committed. His heinous acts, coupled with his unapologetic demeanor, make him one of the most chilling and infamous serial killers in history. 7. The River City Ripper. Have you ever heard of the River City Ripper? The name alone is enough to send chills down your spine. This infamous serial killer, whose real name is William Suff, terrorized California in the 1980s and 1990s. His heinous crimes were so brutal and depraved that they earned him a place among the most notorious serial killers in history. Suff's modus operandi was especially gruesome. He targeted women, often prostitutes, and would strangle them before leaving their bodies in remote locations. His crimes were so violent that he earned the nickname the Riverside Prostitute Killer before his true identity was revealed. Despite his brutal nature, Suff was eventually caught and brought to justice. He was found guilty of murdering at least 12 women and was sentenced to death. The reason why the River City Ripper is such an interesting figure to talk about is the sheer brutality of his crimes. His nickname alone is enough to send shivers down your spine, and the fact that he targeted vulnerable women adds an extra layer of horror to his actions. Suff's ability to evade capture for so long also makes him a fascinating subject for true crime enthusiasts and the general public alike. 6. Herbert Mullen. Herbert Mullen is a name that strikes fear into the hearts of true crime enthusiasts around the world. This notorious American serial killer committed a string of heinous crimes in the 1970s that shocked the public and sent shockwaves through the criminal justice system. Mullen's crimes were especially sinister because they were completely random. He would choose his victims at random, often attacking people who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. His first murder victim was a hitchhiker, and he later went on to kill entire families in their homes. But what really sets Mullen apart from other serial killers is his delusional state of mind.
My earliest memory was I was crawling on my hands and knees, and I was looking into a puddle. I saw myself and the redwood trees reflected, and the sunlight, the sun, and I touched the sun with my finger, and it created little circular waves extending outward in all directions. I felt peaceful and calm, inquisitive, curious, content, grateful, and hopeful.
He believed that his murders were necessary to prevent an impending earthquake, and he even went as far as to talk to birds to receive the messages from God. Mullen's behavior eventually caught up with him, and he was arrested in 1973. He was found guilty on multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The reason why Herbert Mullen is such an epic and fascinating figure to discuss is his complete lack of detachment from reality. His belief that he was preventing an earthquake is a stark reminder of how the human mind can become unhinged and how dangerous it can be when coupled with violent tendencies. Mullen's crimes are a cautionary tale, and his story continues to captivate and terrify audiences to this day. 5. Rose West. Halfway in, we have Rose West, an infamous British serial killer whose crimes are some of the most horrific in modern history. Along with her husband, Fred West, she was responsible for the abduction, sexual abuse, and murder of at least 10 young women, including their own daughter. The West's crimes were so gruesome that their home at 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester, England, became known as the House of Horrors. The couple used the property as a torture chamber, where they would subject their victims to unspeakable acts of violence, rape, and murder before disposing of their remains in the garden.
Enjoyment turned to disaster. That's what happened with all of it, or most of it anyway. It's surprising how long somebody can hold you around the neck before you really have to do something nice. So I finally managed to do it, to take her head off, and then her legs. And it was unbearable. I mean, I can hear that now in my sleep.
Rose was often an active participant in the abuse, taking pleasure in the torment of her victims. She even once tied up her own daughter and watched as her husband sexually abused her. The West crimes only came to light in 1994 after their daughter came forward with accusations of abuse, leading to a police investigation and the discovery of their victims. Rose was found guilty on multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Despite her conviction, she continued to deny any involvement in the murders and showed no remorse for her actions. Her complete lack of empathy or remorse, combined with the sheer brutality of the West crimes, make her a chilling and unforgettable figure in the annals of true crime. The legacy of Rose West crimes continues to haunt the public consciousness, and her story has been the subject of countless books, TV shows, and movies. Her complete detachment from reality and willingness to participate in her husband's depraved fantasies make her one of the most terrifying female serial killers in history. 4. Charles Cullen. Charles Cullen is a former American nurse and one of the most prolific serial killers in history. He was convicted of murdering at least 29 patients while working as a nurse in hospitals across the state of New Jersey. Cullen's crimes were especially heinous because they were committed while he was working as a nurse, a profession that is supposed to save lives. He used his position of trust to administer lethal doses of medication to his patients, often targeting the elderly or those who were terminally ill. What makes Cullen such a fascinating and terrifying figure is the sheer number of his victims. It's estimated that he may have killed as many as 400 patients during his nursing career, although the true number is still unknown.
Are you sorry what you did?
Yes. But like I said, I don't know if I would have stopped.
Cullen's crimes eventually caught up with him, and he was arrested in 2003. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder and attempted murder and was sentenced to life in prison. The reason why Charles Cullen is such a chilling figure to discuss is the fact that he was able to operate for so long without being caught. He preyed on the most vulnerable members of society and used his knowledge and expertise to cover up his crimes. The sheer scale of his killing spree makes him one of the most prolific serial killers in history, and his story continues to fascinate and horrify audiences to this day. 3. Long Island Serial Killer. The Long Island Serial Killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach Killer, is an unidentified American serial killer who is believed to have murdered at least 10 to 16 people, mostly women, over a span of almost 20 years. The killer's method of operation was to target young women who worked as prostitutes, advertising their services online. He would then meet up with them and later dispose of their bodies in a remote area near Gilgo Beach, New York. The bodies were often dismembered and placed in burlap sacks, making identification difficult. The case of the Long Island serial killer has captivated the public's imagination, partly because the identity of the killer remains unknown to this day. The case has been the subject of numerous TV shows, podcasts, and books as investigators continue to search for leads that could help identify the killer. What makes the Long Island serial killer such a chilling figure is the fact that he has been able to operate for such a long time without being caught. His choice of victims who are often marginalized and vulnerable, and his method of disposing of their bodies suggests a deeply disturbed individual who may have been motivated by a twisted sense of power and control. The Long Island serial killer case remains unsolved, and the killer is still at large. The case is a stark reminder of the darkness that exists in our society and the importance of bringing violent criminals to justice. 2. Richard Chase. Richard Chase, also known as the Vampire of Sacramento, was an American serial killer who terrorized California in the late 1970s. Chase was known for his gruesome crimes, which included murder, necrophilia, and cannibalism. Chase's story is one of the most bizarre and disturbing in the annals of serial killer history. He was convinced that his body was deteriorating and that he needed to drink blood to survive. He believed that his heart was shrinking and that by drinking the blood of his victims, he could keep it from shrinking any further. Chase's crimes were especially heinous because of their brutal nature. He would break into people's homes and murder them, often drinking their blood and engaging in necrophilia. He also ate parts of their bodies, including their organs. Chase's mental health deteriorated rapidly, and he was eventually arrested in 1979 after he walked into a neighbor's home and killed everyone inside. He was later convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to death. Richard Chase's story is a disturbing and chilling reminder of the extremes of human behavior. His belief that he needed to drink blood to survive and his willingness to engage in cannibalism and necrophilia make him one of the most deranged and terrifying serial killers in history. Despite his capture and conviction, the sheer brutality of his crimes continues to captivate and horrify audiences to this day. 1. Charles Tex. Charles Tex Watson was a key member of the Manson family, a cult led by the infamous Charles Manson. The Manson family was responsible for a series of gruesome murders in the late 1960s that shocked the world.
I was completely deceived. I was 23 years old when I was on these drugs. And I didn't realize I was into sorcery. I didn't realize I was into witchcraft. I just thought I was playing with drugs and having fun. When in all actuality, I wasn't worshiping satanic symbols. I didn't know anything about the Satanic Bible. I was completely unaware of what I was doing, completely deceived.
Watson played a pivotal role in some of the Manson family's most notorious crimes, including the murder of actress Sharon Tate and her friends at their home in Beverly Hills in 1969. Watson and other members of the family broke into the home and brutally murdered Tate and 4 others, leaving the crime scene in a state of chaos. Watson was also involved in the murder of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, which took place in the following night. Watson and other members of the family broke into the LaBiancas' home and stabbed them to death. Watson was eventually caught and convicted of his crimes, and he remains in prison to this day. His involvement in the Manson family's murder and his willingness to carry out such heinous acts makes him one of the most notorious and reviled criminals in American history. The Manson family's crimes have fascinated and horrified the public for decades, and Watson's role in those crimes is a testament to the power of cults and the dangers of extremism. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of darkness. The stories of these 10 most evil people that the FBI wants you to forget are not for the faint of heart, but they are a reminder of the horrors that can lurk within the human mind. While we may never fully understand the motivations of these killers, we can learn from their crimes and work to prevent such tragedies from happening again. It's important to remember the victims of these heinous crimes and to honor their memory by striving for a safer and more just society. As we wrap up this video, we invite you to continue exploring the mysteries of the human psyche and the complexities of the criminal mind.